On September 8th, 2024, Union Pacific decided to bring their 4014 Big Boy to Rochelle, Illinois, for a display event for the Chicago metro area. Of course, I decided to go. Come on, it's 4014. Yes, I've already seen two other Big Boys. I might as well try and see them all at this point. We obviously drove all the way to Rochelle, but once we arrived, we got screwed over because Apple Maps took us down this ridiculous, insane route that went directly through the yard. Went down there for a while until we came to the no trespassing sign. On our little illegal escapade, we caught a glimpse of these two Burlington Junction switchers, but before we could get a good look at them, we were jump-scared by a thick Union Pacific yard movement with 3 SD70Ms, a Jeep, and an Ace. Boy, this was an insane lash-up. On our way out, we did get a view of those two Burlington Junction switchers. The first one is BJRY 900, which is a standard EMD switcher. Those are pretty rare in 2024, but they're pretty common on shortline railroads. The one behind it, though, is the real prize. That is, I think, an MLW-built Alco-derived S2 model, but I'm not 100% sure because, as you can see, the number isn't visible. Or maybe it is, but certainly not from this distance. The locomotive is in such a bad condition that I'm pretty sure that it isn't even in service anymore. I don't even know how many of these are still around, but it isn't very many. They're definitely rare. I'd probably say they are more in preservation than still in service. Or in storage. Who knows what the future holds for this engine, but hopefully it'll be bright. We changed our course and headed down the proper public way to the event. We passed by that UP yard movement again, and when we got onto the road, we realized that there was just a little traffic heading into the event. I mean, we knew it was going to be crowded at the event, but it never crossed my mind that there was going to be a huge line of cars to get in. So we did the only logical thing and parked our car at the street parking on Willis Road and walked 3 miles all the way to the intermodal facility where Big Boy was. On the way, we got to see these signs proclaiming that this was a steam engine tour, the entrance to the Global 3 Intermodal Terminal, and then we got to see Big Boy for the first time over the water reservoir that's present at the yard. The shot was blurry, obviously, as I'm shooting through the fence. However, a little bit farther up, the fence went away, and we were able to see that it wasn't any less crowded up by the engine. When we finally arrived at the main area of the yard, we saw this long line of maintenance of way flat cars with some scattered MAU equipment at the end. You had to walk all the way down the OCS train just to get to where Big Boy was, which I thought was so cool, because that meant that you got to see all of UP's OCS fleet. Starting with the end car, Union, which is a pretty fitting name for a Union Pacific end car. Next was City of Denver with a strange silver door. The Dome car, Walter Dean. The Experience the Union Pacific car, Promontory. Omaha, which is just a standard coach with nothing really too interesting about it. The baggage car, Pony Express. What I believe is a generator car, number 2055. It doesn't have much in it. except a Union Pacific stepping stool, which I thought was so comical. Another baggage car, Nystrom, I don't know how to say it. Another standard coach, Howard Fogg. It's got a different number arrangement, which is something, I guess. A baggage car, Art Lockman. And in front of that was UP 4015, an SD70M. Given that the steam engine is 4014, UP likes to tag 4015 around with it wherever it goes. Sometimes it has a heritage unit behind it, but most of the time, 4015 tags along with the big boy. It is technically a special unit, as it has a little 4014 styled Union Pacific 4015 logo up on the nose. Heritage units track this thing. You track the CSX sticker units and the CSX Spirit units, this thing deserves to get tracked as well. Anyways, I think it's just so cool that Union Pacific continues to have an SD70M, in the wing scheme no less, tag along behind Big Boy, considering Big Boy is like their major public relations thing. It's crazy they haven't repainted this thing into the new scheme yet. Honestly, I kinda want them to. I'm really interested to see what an SD70M would look like in that scheme. Anyways, in front of it is Jim Adams, which is an auxiliary tender. And another auxiliary tender, Joe Jordan. And of course, up at the front of the train was everybody's favorite locomotive, Big Boy. And I also managed to grab a shot of this tiny maintenance of way equipment. But back to Big Boy. This is Big Boy 4014, obviously, as it's plastered everywhere in the marketing. It was obviously the main event, and so a lot of people were crowded around, which makes sense. This locomotive has a pretty interesting history as far as Big Boys were concerned. It was built in 1941 as part of the first batch and was the 15th built, not 14th, remember, 4,000 existed. Anyways, it was built in 1941 and served throughout all the 40s and the 50s on Union Pacific freight trains. It was designed to handle the grades up Sherman Hill, which makes sense, it's big. Sherman Hill is steep, big locomotive equal powerful locomotive. This was the evolution of the early Challenger design. Yes, the later Challengers came after. Anyways, the Big Boys served for a pretty decently long time as far as post-war, well, kind of post-war steam locomotives are considered. 4014 operated from 1941 until 1959 when it pulled its last train, although it wasn't officially withdrawn until 1962. It had an operational service career of 18 years. As you can see, this locomotive is built by the American Locomotive Company at Schenectady Works, which I think is so crazy that these things were built in New York. Anyways, I also brought my little custom Big Boy along. This one's supposed to be number 4006, but this is 4014, obviously. The engine did blow its whistle once while we were at the event, but it was kind of a lame whistle blast, honestly. Over by the cab area, we get to see, well, the cab. If you look underneath the number, it says 4884-168. The later Challengers are -169. Anyways, here you can see what happened to the locomotive after it was withdrawn. It went to the Pomona County Fairgrounds and was on display there for a long time, until 2013. When Union Pacific decided, hey, we should get a Big Boy to pull excursions and do PR events. And they needed a big locomotive for the upcoming event in 2019, which was the 150th anniversary of the Golden Spike. Considering 3985 had kicked the bucket 3 years prior, it made sense to restore 4014, as it would have been literally less expensive than restoring 3985. Anyways, they did restore Big Boy, and it took 6 years. In 2019, the engine emerged from the shops, did the promontory ceremony, and then went on a tour around the United States. Exactly 5 years from there, in 2024, Union Pacific 4014 is once again going around the country on this Heartland of America tour. As I'm producing this, the engine is in St. Louis, and is preparing to head south for the southern leg of the tour. After we were done marveling over Big Boy, we realized there was actually a set of Norfolk Southern GEs at the other end of the yard, but they were too far away to get any good photos. On the way out, I couldn't not snap a roster shot of 4015, and this panning shot of the entire event. As you can see, there were quite a few people, especially bunched up over by Big Boy. As I said previously, it makes sense. Anyways, then we walked another 3 entire miles all the way back to Willis Road. However, while we were there, we caught a glimpse of a Union Pacific coal train. We decided to stay, knowing that there would be a DPU, and there definitely was. And I'm glad we did stay because this was a Union Pacific experimental scheme engine, one of the engines that was produced during the transition from the Shield scheme to the current scheme. And I mean, it's definitely unique with the wings on the nose and the Union Pacific lettering on the long hood. After that, we went down to Hardee's to get lunch because it was lunchtime. But on our way there, we got stopped by, oh my god, Cascade Green! Yeah, we got jump scared by BNSF 1706, which is a Cascade Green SD40-2 that works the local runs around Rochelle. I was kinda expecting to see this, but no, I wasn't really expecting it. I wasn't tracking it or anything. I didn't know it was sitting here. These two engines are tied down for the night. 1706 here is obviously Cascade Green, but it's also a whiteface Cascade Green, which is unlike the other Cascade Green I saw, which was in Galesburg. At least I didn't have to trespass to film this one. Anyways, behind it was BNSF 1786, which is actually another ex-Burlington Northern SD40-2. How you can tell is that the headlight is mounted on the top of the cab instead of the nose. And the number starts with 17. Anyways, there was another rail fan there at the spot who notified us that there was a BNSF Z-Train coming with a 25th anniversary unit in trail. So of course I had to stick around for that, as I'd never seen a 25th anniversary unit before. After that mid-eye unit rolled away, another train somehow snuck up behind the intermodal. Now, this train was going the exact same speed, so I'm guessing it had to have been going the speed limit in the area. The leaders were just GEVOs, so nothing important. Speaking of GEVOs, that was the DPU on the Z train. Fortunately, the Grainer also had a DPU. Fortunately, it was an Ace. Fortunately-er, it was a Thunder Cab. And with 2 more shots of the XBN Duo, it was time for us to leave Rochelle and head to our next destination. We were supposed to go to Proviso Yard, which is Union Pacific Yard, but we checked heritage units and found that absolutely nothing was there. So we decided to go to Markham Yard instead, which is a CN Yard in Homewood, Illinois, because it's Markham Yard. You are literally guaranteed to see a fallen flag unit. Mainly because one is parked on display at the metro station. This is Illinois Central 8408, a Paducah GP9 rebuild chop nose that is in the Illinois Central New Image Death Star paint with the Operation Lifesaver logo. It's fitting that this engine and caboose, which needs repaint, are here as this was an IC-built yard. Turning our attention to the main line, we see a pair of CNGEs shoving a yard movement into the yard. If you look at 2860's number boards closely, you can see they are actually not the same number board. We spent an eternity trying to figure out how to get on the platform, and once we finally did, we looked into the yard and spotted this CNGE sitting on a sidetrack and a Grand Trunk GP9 far off in the distance. The yard movement eventually stopped reversing and went forward, and we got to see all the auto racks. We were hoping that this was a fully completed train, and it was, but it didn't have a DPU. There was also this nice Providence and Worcester, Genesee and Wyoming branded auto rack. Once the auto racks cleared, I got a good view of the AC-44 sitting out in the yard. Knowing that 3309 and the OCS train were in the area, I thought that this engine might be 3309, so I decided to go over there and see. But before that could happen, I accidentally caught this Metra Electric from the parking lot. We arrived, and sadly, it was only 3364, not the 3309 wafer unit. It was kind of upsetting, but it's fine. At least I got to see a nice shiny CN engine. Plus, I got a slightly better view of the Grand Trunk Jeep sitting in the yard. After that, we headed to possibly the best rail fanning spot in Homewood Yard, Maple Road, where there's a tiny itty-bitty tiny little gap in the trees where you can look through and see some of the yard activity. In the yard, there was CN 2124. I got to see this engine on my last visit to Homewood, but it was obscured behind a boxcar. Now, however, we get to see it in all of its standard cab Dash 80 15th anniversary Unity glory. Also, IC 2466 was still sitting here. If you want more coverage on this engine, check out May Rail Fanning. Over by the shops, we see an interesting sight. A retired North America Scheme C40-8M cowl unit is currently sitting by the shops. I bet you're wondering why. Well, this dead Dash 8 gives us a clue. Your eyes do not deceive you, that's a Dash 8 flipped on its side. CN did this to make it easier to scrap. The Dash 8s are dead on CN, and they're disappearing and being scrapped now in Markham Yard. That C40-8M will soon follow. After that, we drove down Ashland Avenue a couple times so I could get some decent views of some of the engines along there. And oh boy, there were some interesting ones. On the way there, we got to see CN 3010, a paper WC Scheme Jeep, and a CN locomotive simulator, because yes, these exist. Over by the overpass, we saw our first real gem, IC 6250, an actual legit in-service Operation Lifesaver OLS Death Star. This loco has been running the local runs from South Bend up to Battle Creek, Michigan recently. And I've tried to catch it multiple times, but I haven't. Now I at least get to see it. Hopefully you guys will get an update one day, and I'll have caught this thing moving. However, that one of three incredibly rare, remarkable locomotive was totally overshadowed by what was in front of it. BC 4642, a tricolor scheme BC Rail C44-9WL Canadian cab. There are two of these still around, and I'm pretty sure 4464, the other one, is in storage. These are insanely rare. I knew 4642 was in the area, but I had written off catching it because catching trains on the CN South Bend sub sucks because there's basically only one rail cam, and it's all the way up in Durand. So I was not expecting to see this unit. Thankfully, they parked it in Markham Yard, and I happened to show up at exactly the right time. Behind it was another Canadian cab, a GP38-2W, and behind that was an SD70M. I couldn't not take a video of 4642 as we drove away. Behind the Canadian cab and SD75M, there were a few other locomotives. There was a pair of SD60s, one with the big logo and one with the small logo, which is definitely notable based on where they are, back to back. And behind them was a, now much better in view, Grand Trunk Jeep, number 6221, with its door open, which is just sitting there in the yard awaiting a crew. Near the center of the yard, there was some MOW equipment. And over by the locomotive shops, there were quite a few EMDs. an SD70M-2, an SD75M, another SD70M-2, an SD60, another SD70M-2, and a C40-A are all visible. Past these sheds, we try to get a good view of the 15th anniversary logo, which is only on one side of 2124. We missed it the first time, so we decided to go back. We get a good view of 3010 here. Ah, much better. I know you can't even read that logo, but this is the closest I'm ever going to get to it, unless I come to Homeward on a day where it isn't windy, and I can use my drone to fly over to the other side of 2124. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this vlog, and make sure to come back next time for another vlog just like this one. Some of the lines in this were weird, and there were many outtakes. This is definitely cobbled together, more so than my other videos, and I'm sure you noticed. That's because this is actually my second time recording this, because the first video just died. We decided to delete it for some reason. So, yeah. Anyways, make sure to come back next time, and that's it.